Herbert Hoover Presidential Report Card by Annie Aquavita.
And Aaron Wu. Herbert Hoover was the 31st President of the United States. He was born into a Quaker home in Iowa on August 10, 1874. He became an orphan when he was only 9 years old and was raised by his aunt and uncle. He graduated from Stanford University as a mining engineer and was appointed head of the Food Administration after the U.S. entered into World War I. After serving as Secretary of Commerce under the administrations of Harding and Coolidge, Hoover became the Republican nominee for president in 1928 and was elected in 1929, staying in office until 1933 when he lost his re-election campaign. We have judged the president on the 8 roles that he must fulfill, which include chief legislator, chief of state, chief diplomat, commander-in-chief, chief executive, chief guardian of the economy, and chief of weird animals.
The first role of presidency is chief legislator. In this role, the president can influence Congress while they make laws through meetings and speeches to Congress, although he does not have this responsibility of drafting legislation himself. We judge this category based on Hoover's success in passing legislation to help the Depression and by the strength of his relationship with Congress. Although he started out with a very strong Republican majority in the House, with the onset of the Depression, Hoover found himself unable to assume the leadership of Congress. Republicans in Congress often failed to support the president, and he also had difficulties persuading Congress to pass his legislation. In 1930, he ended up losing his Republican majority in the House, going from 270 Republican seats to 217 at the opening of Congress. The purpose of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was to protect domestic farmers against foreign agricultural imports by raising tariffs on imported goods in the United States. And although many economists were adamantly against it, even asking Hoover to veto the bill, it was passed on June 17, 1930. It turns out that the economists were right, as the act caused other countries to raise their tariffs as well, which ended up weakening trade and worsening the Depression. Overall, we gave Hoover a C because although his relationship with Congress seemed strong before the Depression, he quickly lost his strong Republican majority in the House and much of his power over Congress. In addition, most of the legislation he helped pass ended up hurting the Depression instead of helping it.
The next role we will discuss is the Chief of State. For this role, the President is supposed to keep up appearances at events and communicate with the citizens, allowing him to represent the United States and promote American values and ideals. We judge this category based on Hoover's reputation among citizens and his communication skills in times of need. When he was first elected, Hoover was riding in the wave of post-war prosperity. Although he was seen as a bit dull in his speeches, he was known as the Great Engineer because of his excellent coordinating and managerial skills, and communicated well through frequent press conferences. However, after the Depression, Hoover greatly reduced his public appearances and canceled conferences, thus creating what was known as a wall of silence with the American people. Hoover was known as shy and reserved, and was also very sensitive to criticism. He was at his best when dealing with small groups of men, as he was not very good at sharing his real feelings to people he didn't know very well, and much of his attitudes and beliefs could be because of his Quaker roots. He lacked the common touch and was often just seen as a stereotypical big businessman. Overall, for the role of Chief of State, we gave Hoover a C because he failed to identify with the people and communicate well with them. Although he worked hard at his job, his sporadic communication with the people showed that he could not be there for them, especially when they needed leadership and assurance the most.
The next role we will discuss is the role of being chief diplomat. For this role, the president must communicate with leaders of other foreign nations and develop a foreign policy with Congress in order to establish our relationships with other nations. We judge this category based upon Hoover's relationship with other countries and the successfulness of his policies to create and uphold peace. President Hoover had a policy of peace and no aggression. Hoover's good neighbor policy was one of his most successful diplomatic initiatives. This policy worked toward decreasing government intervention in South and Central America. In relation to Latin America, he went on a 10-week tour throughout Latin America giving speeches outlining his vision for the relationship. Even though Hoover made allies, he also made enemies as well. When Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931, U.S. warships were dispatched in order to protect U.S. citizens. This created the Hoover-Simpson Doctrine, which declared that any new territory gained by force would not be recognized by the United States. This furthered tension with Japan, even though it was moral. Overall, for the role of chief diplomat, we gave Hoover a B+ because we believe that Hoover did a good job at trying to become allies with many foreign countries. Although not every method of his worked or was smart, he was able to have a good relationship with multiple foreign nations.
The next role that we will evaluate President Hoover on is Chief of Party. In this role, the President helps members of his political party get elected by campaigning for those members that have supported his policies. We judge this category based off of Hoover keeping congressional seats, which would drum up support to give a Republican majority in the House. We also judged him based on his successfulness of campaigning for re-election. Hoover was the first major party candidate to take a whistle-stop tour around the United States where he spoke from the back of a train. Many of his campaigns were also delivered via radio. He was portrayed by the public as an efficient engineer in technology and a successful and skilled administrator. Hoover won the Republican presidential nomination with ease, but after the stock market crashed, the midterm elections marked a turning point for the Democratic nominations in the House and Senate, where Republican support was dropping and Hoover lost his Republican majority in the House after the first 2 years, did not get re-elected, and much of this was due to his drop in approval rating because of the Great Depression. Overall, for the role of Chief of Party, we gave Hoover a D because Hoover did not do a good job at keeping congressional seats. This then led to the loss of a Republican majority and a loss of support of his party as a whole.
Another role the president has to fulfill is Commander-in-Chief. As Commander-in-Chief, the president is in control of the U.S. Armed Forces and all military leaders must take orders from him. We judged this category based on how well Hoover was able to control the military and how his decisions impacted America. For example, the Bonus Army was a group of World War I veterans who demanded early payment of bonus that they were promised and protested by marching and camping out in front of the White House. Soon the United States Army was required to remove the veterans. Hoover sent the U.S. Army to forcibly remove the veterans. They did this by using tear gas and other weapons which killed many innocent people. Hoover took the blame for the cruel treatment towards the veterans, which dropped his approval ratings by a lot and lost him any chance at re-election. This event was his final political failure that cost him the re-election. Overall, for the role of Commander-in-Chief, we gave Hoover a C because many of his decisions about military ended up being bad and worsened situations even more. Although while he was president, he did have many positive outcomes as Commander-in-Chief as well.
The next role we will evaluate is the Chief Executive. In this role, the President has the power to appoint various officials to administer and uphold laws. We judge this category based on Hoover's ability to appoint officials and advisors that would uphold and carry out laws successfully. We also judged him on his ability to utilize his power of the executive order. During the beginning of his presidency, Hoover showed his ability to appoint officials by nominating Charles Evans Hughes to be the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Early in his presidency, Hoover also appointed Horace Albright to be the director of the National Park Service. Hoover used his power of the executive order to help benefit veterans and protect the environment. In 1930, Hoover signed Executive Order 5398, which created the Veterans Administration. It was in charge of government activities relating to or affecting war veterans and was renamed in 1989 to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, which we still have today. Through executive order, he was able to add to the lands of already established national parks and used it to rename the Colorado National Forest to Roosevelt National Forest in honor of former President Theodore Roosevelt. Overall, we gave Hoover an A for this position, as he was able to show his power to successfully appoint officials and advisors to uphold laws and that he would listen to. He also used his power of the executive order to improve the country as a whole, helping to create a sustainable future and helping to honor the veterans that fought for the country.
Our next role was the Chief Guardian of the Economy. In this role, the president is in charge of helping to keep the economy stable and combat unemployment. He should help the country prosper financially. We judged Hoover on his ability to combat unemployment since this was a major issue during the Great Depression. We also judged Hoover on his successfulness to bring the economy back up to what it once was. Hoover took office during a time of much stock speculation. Although warned by economic experts, he was confident that the system of free enterprise in the U.S. would erase poverty. However, his hopes were soon crushed when America experienced a business depression, also called the Great Depression, after the stock market crash of 1929, leaving the American people in the greatest economic crisis ever to afflict the country. It led to an increase in the unemployment rate and many banks were shut down, including the largest bank at the time. Although it was not his fault, Hoover failed in his efforts to bring the economy back up, and many Americans were still living in extreme poverty. For the role of Chief Guardian of the Economy, we gave Hoover a D because although he tried to fix the economy, he ended up making it worse. He was blamed for the Great Depression and wasn't able to fix it, which caused a lot of people to doubt him in the end.
And our last role was the Chief of Weird Animals. In this role, the president would be in charge of taking care of and owning animals that would normally be considered weird or unusual. We judged Hoover on the quantity and types of animals that he owned. During Hoover's administration, the White House was home to a variety of pets. He had quite a lot of dogs, including a German Shepherd named King Tut, who was beloved by the people. Hoover also adopted a wild opossum that he found on the grounds, as well as 2 young alligators that were owned by his son. In addition to these pets, Hoover also owned a canary and a few cats. For this position, we gave Hoover an A- because although he did have a numerous amount of pets, as well as quite a few weird ones, other presidents like Calvin Coolidge had even weirder ones, including a pet raccoon.
In conclusion, President Hoover was a decent president who tried his best to do what he thought would help the people of America for the better. He was able to accomplish many things, like helping the environment and making allies with Latin America. Hoover was a Republican who was very well known for his humanitarian efforts to provide relief to millions of Europeans during and after World War I. All these achievements have helped the American people and have made America better. Hoover was a president who really did care for the health of the people. On the other hand, many people blamed Hoover for the stock market crash that led to the Great Depression. Even though Hoover was not responsible for the Great Depression, his poor relationship with Congress and his failed attempts at trying to make laws did not help rebuild the economy and weakened his relationship with the people, which eventually caused him to lose the re-election campaign. All of those reasons explain why we are giving President Hoover the overall grade of a C+, because although many people believed he was the cause of the Great Depression, Hoover did accomplish many positive things that bettered America.